First of all, I wanted to say welcome to the Polish House. Before welcoming each of one of you personally, I just wanted to say, as you know, today we are here to speak about the fact that Central Eastern Europe is a very dynamic and a very entrepreneurial region. But I think that one point that we have already made today is that we are really early risers. And I really wanted to thank you all for coming here at this early time to speak about growing Europe. I just wanted to say that it is really incredible to see everybody here, being given that it was just an idea not so long ago. With some of you, with Dina, with John, with the Madam Ambassador, I spoke around the fact, let's use the Polish House, let's use the fact that we're in Davos to promote Central Eastern Europe. And here we are, we have 4 heads of state with us. We have the President of Croatia, the President of Poland, President of Latvia, and the Prime Minister of Estonia. And we have illustrious guests who represent the United States of America, who represent business, who represent the most dynamic and the most influential institutions here on the planet, speaking around growing Europe, and I can't tell you how much excited I am. If it wasn't for the early time, you would see me even more excited. And standing here next to a person whose articles I read every week is even more an honor.
Pavel, thank you very much indeed. I think your mic's liver than mine. Thank you very much indeed. It's a great, speaking of honor, it's a great honor for the Financial Times to be associated with this event, so thanks for asking us to do that. I'm tempted to say I've never seen such a concentration of political and economic power in such a small space. But it's wonderful that everybody's got here this morning, and it's going to be a fascinating discussion. Just briefly, it reminds me of a previous period in my life in 2004 when I was a Brussels correspondent, when the great enlargement happened and Poland, Estonia, Latvia joined the EU, later to be joined by Croatia. I couldn't have guessed that 15 years on, we would be standing here and these countries would be seen as possibly the most economically dynamic part of the European Union, nor could I have guessed that Britain would be on the point of leaving. But that is another story. It's great to be here this morning. Let me just very briefly explain how the morning's going to run. Each of the presidents and the Prime Minister are going to give a brief presentation of about 5 minutes each. You're going to have to get used to me popping up to introduce each of them in turn. And then after that, we'll have a panel discussion with some of the corporate names that Pavel mentioned earlier. So let's get things going. First of all, I'd like to call upon the President of Poland, Andrzej Duda. Thank you very much indeed.
Dear Madam President, dear Mr. President, distinguished First Lady of Latvia, dear Mr. Prime Minister, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, honored guests and friends. It's a pleasure to be here with you. I'm grateful for the invitation. My special thanks go to the Polish House and our partners, the Polish insurance company PZU and PKO SA Bank, for organizing this event. It gives me a wonderful opportunity to talk about my own region, which is the fastest growing market in Europe and perhaps around the world. Identifying the sources of economic vitality of our region and the potential tools to foster its economic growth has been one of my priorities over the last 5 years. It's my honor to open this debate along with my dear colleague and friend, President of Croatia, Kolinda Grabar-Kitarović, who has been my reliable and active ally in this process. Thank you very much, Kolinda. It's also my pleasure to be here with friends and partners, President of Latvia, Mr. Eglis Levits, as well as Prime Minister of Estonia, Mr. Jüri Ratas. Almost 5 years ago, our joint effort to develop economic potential of Central Eastern Europe resulted in the idea of launching the 3Cs initiative, a platform aimed at fostering integration of infrastructure and the economy of 12 countries located in the territory between the Baltic, the Adriatic, and the Black Sea. This geographical closeness, along with cultural affinity, covering economic interest, as well as similar challenges, stimulate us to plan deepened cooperation in infrastructure, energy, and economy. The results are visible, as the economic role of Central Europe is on the rise. Since the 90s, the countries of Central and Eastern Europe have undergone remarkable socio-economic transformation, and the region has become an important growth engine for the whole European Union. The consequence of this spectacular path of development has been our accession to the Euro-Atlantic institutions, including NATO and the EU. As a result of 3 enlargement waves in 2004, 2007, and 2013, countries of our region become the members of European Union, increasing EU's potential by more than 110 million people, expanding its territory by 28%, yet generating only about 10% of its GDP. But times are changing. Today, we are one of Europe's most dynamical developing regions. Between 1996 and 2017, economies of our region have recorded 114% increase in GDP per capita, compared to just 27% in Western countries. We are one of the most attractive regions to invest in. Put together, our countries represent 1.4 trillion euros of GDP. Our economies are steadily and constantly catching up with their Western counterparts in terms of the most important economic indicators. We are still able to offer relatively low labor costs, strong human capital with well-educated people, friendly tax environment, large consumer market, and the best locations for foreign direct investments. The engine of the economic growth and our biggest competitive advantage is a diversified economy. There are various sectors operating in the region, both traditional and innovative, such as auto industry, IT services, agriculture, wood industry, real estate, food processing, electronics, and finance. As you all know, Poland is the largest economy among the Central Eastern Europe states and one of the European growth champions. I'm very proud that during my term as president, my country was able to join the club of EU's largest economies with a GDP of around 500 billion euros. Ladies and gentlemen, despite all positive developments, countries of the 3Cs still face the economic and infrastructural blockades and require significant investments. According to the surveys, the investment needs for the modernization of the transport, energy, and digital infrastructure in the 12 countries of Central and Eastern Europe require over 1 trillion euros. The 3Cs initiative is our response. Being one of the co-founders of this platform, I'm strongly convinced that this instrument will foster economic convergence of the region with the western part of the European Union. This is already happening through developments in infrastructure, economics, and social cooperation, and interconnectivity. Three Cs countries combine high growth with high stability. Therefore, investors can achieve high yet safe rates of return from their investments. Our strategic goal within the Three Cs initiative is fostering the development of the north-south communication, road and rail networks, inland waterways, energy interconnectors, and digital infrastructure, fiber optic networks, 5G networks, e-commerce logistic hubs. This goal cannot be achieved without the participation of private capital. That is why last year, as a result of successful cooperation of development institutions from Poland, Romania, Czech Republic, and Latvia, Three Cs Initiative Investment Fund was established to bring together both public and private investors. Its capital will be used to co-finance priority infrastructure projects in the region. The initiative and the idea of strengthening our cooperation met with growing interests of business entities. Last September, during the Economic Forum in Krynica-Zdrój, so-called Polish Davos, I joint stock exchange index CEE Plus was created. The collaboration of the Warsaw Stock Exchange and other local stocks exchanges opened the region to the companies and investors from all over the world. Dear friends, I would like to focus your attention on yet another instrument of boosting cooperation in a region that is being established today. I'm talking about the growing Europe Business Council. Its role is to promote the Central and Eastern Europe as an attractive place for investments and support economic activities in the CEE region. I'm very proud of these initiatives. The fund, the CEE Plus Index, and the Growing Europe Business Council represent a modern business model introduced by the Three Cs countries. This is how we see economic growth of our region. This is a vision that is shared by our strategic partners. Last but not least, I want to express my gratitude to Estonia, who is organizing the 5th Three Cs Initiative Summit in Tallinn this June. Mr. Prime Minister, good luck with the preparations. You can count on us. I hope to see you all in Tallinn. Thank you very much.
Mr. President, thank you very much indeed for that inspiring address. And now I'd like to call upon the President of Croatia, Kolinda Grabar-Kitarović, as our next speaker. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and good morning to you all. First of all, dear colleagues, presidents, Mr. Prime Minister, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear organizers, thank you for being here so early in the morning for this, I believe, very important panel that will further spur the development of the Three Cs initiative. It's great to be here this morning. We presidents never sleep, so it wasn't that much of a problem to arrive early in the morning. But for you who have jet lag, I do sympathize with all of you, and hopefully will keep your attention. I will try to be short in my remarks, although Andrzej and I, as co-founders of the initiative, we consider that, I won't say as our baby, but as the one of the most important projects that we started. And that has grown so much that I can't even believe that just within a few short years we're here in Davos speaking about what we wanted to achieve, and that is speaking to businesses as our key partner in this initiative. When Andrzej and I first met back in 2015, shortly after I assumed office, I shared with him my positions, my views on Central Europe. For me, this isn't Central and East Europe, but really the authentic Central Europe, the backbone of European security and cohesion. And we realized we had so many similar thoughts and ideas on how we have to start connecting the north and the south of the region. After the end of the Cold War, the countries that re-emerged in the space that was once under a different system started reconnecting with the West. But we lacked these connections between our countries. And in Europe, of course, there are still visible differences between the North and the South, the East and the West, and the so-called old and the new Europe. And those differences are not only physical, they're also mental, I would say, as well. We still need to do a little bit more on spurring European unity, cohesion, and all other goals that underlie the European integration process. And that's precisely what we wanted to do, to set up an initiative to connect our countries from the Baltic to the Adriatic and to the Black Seas, to work on erasing these differences and to provide the same opportunities to our citizens as the citizens in the rest of Europe have. One has to also acknowledge that there are not only differences between our countries, but within our countries as well. And this is why cohesion was our first priority that we put forward. Cohesion and overall development, competitiveness of our industries, of our economies, and true convergence in strengthening the resilience and incentives for economic growth. Now, we know that true convergence is not easy to achieve, especially if you have two systems side by side, parallel next to each other, and that these differences are rooted in historic circumstances. So it's not an easy task, nor a spontaneous process. It needs to be worked on. It requires a developed market and corresponding development of economic activities, together with our capabilities, abilities, and skill to attract new technologies and develop quality human potential. Of course, connectivity in all of this was very important. I thank our partners, in particular the Atlantic Council, in assisting us with putting together the initiative. We started with exploratory talks with our colleagues in New York in September of 2015. And during those exploratory talks, I undertook the commitment to hold the first summit of the initiative in Dubrovnik in 2016. We wanted to put forward a realistic initiative. I know there was a little bit of suspicion in the beginning about political goals, etc. But what we were interested in, apart from our security, prosperity, and of course, in connecting with each other, in raising the competitiveness of our country, was to really bring about that cohesion within the region and with the rest of the European Union, and of course within our own countries. So we have developed an initiative that puts forward concrete projects. And we've demonstrated that we can work without bureaucracy, just with volunteer work and with the assistance and help of many friends here in Europe and in the United States. And the initiative has been growing because people have realized that we actually mean serious business. For the second summit in Warsaw, Croatia put together a list of about 150 projects worth over 50 billion euros. And then we worked based on those projects and selected a number of realistic projects that could be really be put in practice. With each summit that followed, Bucharest, Ljubljana, and I believe in Tallinn, We have made new steps forward and we've achieved new milestones. The US and Germany are partners of the initiative, but also the financial institutions such as the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, the European Investment Bank, and the World Bank. At its core, the initiative is aimed at the prosperity of the whole of the European Union because a strong Central Europe means a more powerful Europe as a whole. The progress of Central Europe, as Andrzej has talked about it, is visible. It's experienced one of the most remarkable economic transformations ever and is one of the fastest growing EU regions. As we all know, cooperation in Central Europe is not just desirable, it's paramount. And Central Europe could also be seen as a beacon of commitment to the European idea, not only for those countries who are striving to become member countries of the European Union, but also for some of the countries who have been long time members to remind ourselves of what the European project was actually about. Most of us who are united in the 3 Cs initiative have this historic opportunity to work together towards the realization of a European digital transport energy project in which each country involved will profit undoubtedly. And those are the 3 pillars of the initiative: transportation, digitalization, and energy security, energy competitiveness, and independence. Croatia's main interests in the initiative are transportation, infrastructure, digitalization, and as regards energy, building of the LNG terminal, but also connecting to the rest of Europe and providing for the reverse flow. Croatia's economy right now is growing at the rate of about 3%. That is not enough. We want to spur it. We do have one of the most developed highway networks in the EU and produce the fastest accelerating electric car in the world, but there are so many voids to be filled. So in the context of EU membership, we strive to enter into the Eurozone and the Schengen area and also to become member of the OECD. We're also planning to implement ambitious reforms to boost growth, build economic resilience, and maximize the benefits of Euro area membership. In the year in which we mark our 30th anniversary of the first democratic elections, and the year in which we hold for the first time in our history the presidency of the EU Council, I'm certain that Croatia will indeed be successful in its efforts. And as far as the 3 Cs initiative is concerned, it's not a finite initiative. Its projects and goals are long-term, and through this initiative, Central Europe is finally taking charge of its own destiny, and we're here to stay. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam President, for giving us such a fluent and interesting overview of what's happening both on the ground and the underlying rationale of why all this is happening. You also mentioned your cooperation with the Atlantic Council, which gives me an opportunity to recognize Fred Kemp, my old friend from the Atlantic Council, who from here on in be taking on the moderating and introduction duties. So Fred, thank you very much indeed for that. But let me now call upon our next president, President Egil Lavits of Latvia. President.
Dear colleagues and friends, if we should characterize the region between Baltics, between Adriatic, and between Black Sea, then there are some notions, some characteristics. And the first characteristic is, in my view, dynamic. This is the most dynamic region in Europe and one of the most dynamic regions also in the whole world. And this is the crucial word for the development of our region. We can also say that, that we have well-educated people and also very good entrepreneurship, which does not avoid risks. And this is the basis for economic growth. And in terms of economic growth, of course, we are the champions in Europe, this region. This initiative is a political and economic infrastructure where we can cooperate with each other. And 3Cs initiative provides us with a framework of cooperation. And the center of this cooperation is to build transport infrastructure, energy infrastructure, and also other infrastructure projects in order to have this region as one region in Europe. I can mention from the projects where Latvia is especially involved, Rail Baltica project. Rail Baltica is, of course, for the Baltic countries, very important, but not only for the Baltic countries. It's also very important for Finland, for Poland, and for the whole region, because this is a basis for transportation ways in our region. I can mention also from the common projects, the common natural gas market, where Finland, Estonia, and Latvia are members and participating, and it is also a contribution to the energy independence of the region, of course, of our countries. If I come to Latvia, then also I can see, of course, we are one of the most growing economies in Europe, but as a lawyer and with a long experience in European law, and I can compare the different legal systems, I can see that Latvian legal system is very friendly to investments and very friendly to business. Low taxes, I would say, despite then sometimes you can hear otherwise, very easy and very not complicated legal system. Our tax system is one of the best in Europe. It is also recognized by the specialists, tax lawyers, and this is also a very important contribution to the economic growth in Latvia and also for the region. Also, the legal infrastructure should not be forgotten as one of the factors for economy, for the business. For example, I can say that Latvia has one of the best legal environment for startups, and it is much more easier to establish a startup in Latvia as in many other countries from the legal point of view. I will only stress this as a lawyer, and also this factor as a factor for economic system. Coming to Europe, I will say that our region, countries of our region are participating in the shaping of the future of whole Europe, or the European Union. Therefore, cohesion, and my Croatian colleague has mentioned cohesion as a special goal for the region, it is also a goal for the whole Europe. And for this reason, we should also say to our Western European partners that it is the common goal, not only goal for our region, and that means also respective financial foundings by now we are in the negotiations about the multi-annual financial framework, and of course we are all interested that the new financial framework would be able and would promote the cohesion as a common goal and not postpone the realization of this goal. It's very important for all countries of our region. I would say also one thing more. till now, or maybe in the last 20 years, we wanted to achieve the same achievements as Western European countries. But I think now the time is come that we are also participating in the standard settings for the whole Europe. The standards are not coming from the special region of Europe for the all member states, but from all member states in different areas, in political areas, and also in legal area. So to say, we should be on the same level as all member states and participate in the settings of common European standards. Maybe I can mention an actual example. Latvia has organized now, after certain problems, very effective anti-money laundering system in Latvia. And we would like to share our experience with other European countries in order that we will get a common European standard. Because the capital has no boundaries, and it is not effective enough that one member state is implementing such standards. It is a standard necessary for the whole Union. And Latvia will also share our experience in this specific legal but also economic field. So, dear friends and colleagues, it is my pleasure to give some characteristics for our region as a whole, and especially for Latvia, but also we should think about our contribution to the development of the whole Union. Thank you very much.
I'm Fred Kemp of the Atlantic Council, and it's my honor to stand before you to have the two founders here of the 3Cs initiative. Mr. President, Madam President, it's been an honor supporting you in this effort, and we'll continue to do so. And it's now my honor to introduce the final speaker of the heads of state and government, the Prime Minister of Estonia, the gentleman who will be hosting and the country that will be hosting the initiative this year. And then after his remarks, we'll then call up our all-star panel, and I'll ask them to come straight to the stage after his remarks, and then I'll moderate a panel on all of this. But Mr. Prime Minister, welcome to the stage.
Honorable Presidents, dear ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, it is my pleasure to participate at the Executive Breakfast Forum with a special emphasis on the economic vitality of the Central and Eastern Europe. It gives us a good chance to explore what practical and positive steps we can take not only among ourselves in the region, but mainly together with our friends, with our allies and partners in the US and elsewhere. In that context, I am once again very proud to announce that the 5th 3Cs Summit and the Business Forum will take place in Tallinn on the 16th and 17th of June this summer. It will be another great opportunity for us to improve infrastructure, connectivity, digitalization and integration of the Central and Eastern Europe and beyond. Let me outline a few practical goals for 2020 Tallinn Summit's Business Forum. The first, we plan to focus on digitalization and digital infrastructure. Our goal is that digital solutions that save time and also save money will be at the heart of every connectivity project in the future. Secondly, our goal is to develop the 3Cs Initiative Investment Fund further and make it a strong and, of course, working instrument that has a crucial role in providing extra financing for the region's infrastructure different projects. And, of course, our executive plan foresees to organize a substantial business forum with clear, practical results by promoting the 3Cs investment fund. Attracting the investments, raising the visibility of the suitable projects, and connect the interest of investors with the ones of businesses. By saying that, I am particularly happy to see such important global investment and business leaders taking part in this morning event here in Polish House, and even more pleased to see several of you forming such a strong discussion panel after our speeches. Thank you for being actively engaged in talking about 3C's dimensional cooperation, including business terms. And of course, last but not least, I would like to thank the Atlantic Council for its role in the 3C's initiative and for being our very good and very close partner in preparation of Business Forum of the Summit. The key to success lies in strong cooperation between the 3C's countries, international institutions, and private sector. We all have the stake here. Let us unify our strengths to raise the economic vitality in this region and connect all the respective private and public partners by organizing successfully 3C's Business Forum together. I'm really looking forward to seeing you all in Tallinn. Thank you for your attention.
So thank you so much for that. And Mr. Prime Minister, it's our honor to be supporting this fifth summit. And thank you for also sharing that we will be particularly making a success of the business forum. Any of you who want to leave your business cards on the way out, who are interested in attending in Tallinn on June 16th, 17th, please do that. I also want to salute in the audience Ian Brzezinski and Denise Forsthuber, who have been instrumental in organizing this and instrumental in the 3Cs initiative. So Ian, you may actually recognize the Brzezinski name, those of you who know Central and Eastern Europe. And so it's a great legacy. The Atlantic Council couldn't be prouder to be a partner alongside Goldman Sachs and Google of this morning's discussion. The Council's got a long history of engagement in Central and Eastern Europe. Back to my days, I covered the rise of solidarity, the changes, Václav Havel in the Czechoslovakia then, Czech Republic now, as a reporter for the Wall Street Journal. I take this all very personally. It's great to see the three presidents and the Prime Minister here. Thank you so much for being here and underscoring the vibrancy of the region and how it has become a driver of growth in Europe writ large. I think part of the sales point for the 3Cs initiative is all the stability and institutional framework of the European Union, and then many of its members, also members of NATO, but all the vibrancy and the economic vibrancy of the region. So the most important of the multilateral efforts includes the 3Cs initiative, combined effort of 12 democracies to accelerate the development of cross-border energy, transport, and digital infrastructure. So let me go right to the panelists. I'm going to introduce them all briefly, and then I'll turn first to the ambassador and then try to move the conversation as quickly as I can. Georgette Mosbacher is a longtime friend, U.S. ambassador to the Republic of Poland, and she is a person who just gets things done. She's in her post for less than 2 years, and she's actually accomplished more than most ambassadors do in a century. And she's contributed to launching a new phase in the bilateral military relationship. She's delivered Poland visa waiver status, a step that will significantly deepen political and economic ties between the U.S. and Poland. And it's not surprising she gets this much done because she's also a business executive, entrepreneur, political activist. John Rogers, Executive Vice President of Goldman Sachs and Chairman of the Board of Directors of the Atlantic Council. He joined the Goldman Sachs in 1994. He served as Undersecretary at the U.S. Department of State, Assistant Secretary at U.S. Treasury, and Assistant to the President of the White House, a recipient of the Presidential Citizen Medal in 1985. So he can speak from a investor perspective, business perspective, and a government perspective. David McCormick, Chief Executive Officer of Bridgewater Associates. He's also the chairman of the International Advisory Board of the Atlantic Council. Dave joined Bridgewater 2009. He too brings powerful government service to the table, having served as U.S. Treasury Undersecretary for International Affairs, as well as senior posts at U.S. National Security Council, Department of Commerce, and I always like to add, of course, a West Point graduate. Pavel Surovka, our host here, CEO of PZU. As CEO of PZU, Poland's biggest insurance company with operations in 5 countries, he heads Central and East Europe's biggest financial group. He is the chairman of PZU SA, Poland's second largest bank. And I hope in my first question to him, you'll talk about this very exciting new business council, which I know you've been instrumental in bringing together. And then finally on this panel, Karan Bhatia, also someone I've known many years from his time as president of GE's Government Affairs and Policy Division. He too has lots of government experience, including service as Deputy U.S. Trade Representative. He advises, he's actually a leader for Google on policy issues and leads Google's work with policymakers and government officials in the U.S. and around the world as Vice President, Government Affairs and Policy. So that's the panel, and it's really a heavyweight, terrific panel. And I'd like to start with you, Madam Ambassador, because you are the U.S. government's interagency lead on the 3 Cs initiative. Unusual to have an interagency lead as an ambassador in the region. So I'd love to hear how that came about and what you see as the significance of this initiative from a political standpoint, but you can also talk about the business standpoint and the business opportunities as well.
Thank you. Let me just start by reminding everyone that when President Trump first visited Poland, his speech was basically geared about the 3 Cs initiative and the importance of it. I would say that that has only heightened in this great power competition where the United States sees an opportunity to contain China and their Belt and Road Initiative in the Eastern and Central Europe. We believe that the Chinese see that as the gateway to Europe, that Central Europe would be the interoperable between China, or Far East, and Europe. And for those reasons, the United States is very keen on seeing the 3 Cs initiative be successful. And I would add, go a step further. We want to see Eastern Europe, Eastern Central Europe really reach its potential because it is the eastern flank of NATO. It is the buffer zone between China, Russia, and as long as it's growing and it's healthy and it's strong, that makes it a good ally for not only the United States, but for its neighbors. And this is a region that has a history, and a very young history, 30 years, of knowing of what it's like living under the Russian boot. So we want, the United States of America wants to support that in every way. From a business perspective, it's pretty obvious, I think, why Eastern Central Europe being really the growth engine in Europe now. When you have double-digit growth, you have an educated population, you have a strong work ethic, you have a stable government, you have security. This is a good place to invest. Those are the basics of business. And I would say that to get back to basics, we're here in Davos talking about big ideas. IA, CRISPR, gene editing, deep learning, but it all comes down to the same thing. And that is, how do we make life better for our citizens? So I would say we start with that, and we work backwards. What is it that people want? They want a safe, robust opportunities, and we need the governments in Eastern Central Europe to step back, because they can learn from our mistakes as well as our successes. They're only 30 years into it, so they don't have the baggage that some of, such as the United States, where you have 200 years, and sometimes it's not so easy to correct those mistakes. So take a look at what we've done right. Take a look at what we've done wrong. I think the 3 C's is a situation where big is better. Critical mass is at 100 million people. Now you start to get the attention of investors because of the potential of that. And as long as policies are in place by the 3 C's governments that are favorable to business, they will get that investment. Having said all of that, I think the 3 C's has this is the crossroads, the Business Council, I think, which will be the pivotal thing that will really take it to its operational level. I do think that it's important that the 3 C's be branded, that you have a place that you can call or an email or frequently ask questions. I think it's been one of the things lacking, because a lot of people still don't know what the 3 C's initiative is. And we've got to get that defined. We've got to get those projects that are off the ground. We've got to let everyone know how those are doing. Success begets success. And proof of concept is always a driving force. So having said that, I will take the microphone and turn it to the next person.
Let me just very quick follow-up. So you talked about branding, you talked about someone to call. So for the Prime Minister of Estonia, what is going to be the most important thing for 3 C's to pull off this year? You've worked very strongly at it. You are a person who gets things done. What do they have to get done, in your view, this year?
Well, they actually have to get one of the projects up, funded, the business plan, transparent. But let's step back even before that. I would recommend that each of the countries in the 3 C's designate a special envoy to the 3 C's. I think it's that important. The problem is, I know for myself as an ambassador, who do I call? Who do I call in your government? And who do I call in the Polish government? When I want to engage, or I want to introduce possible investors, I don't know who to work with. I would say that's a beginning, and that would, with real authority, almost cabinet level, and that would drive the dialogue. And I'm not talking about doing a conference every year. I'm talking about meeting every month, having a newsletter that tells you what you are accomplishing. What are your goals? Setting those out and letting stakeholders know the progress you're making. This starts to look very real. And as good as these conferences may or may not be, they're still conferences. I am driven by results, and I think, and you have to communicate those results. I mean, you have to advertise the results, because that's what attracts investment.
Thank you, and I think I know who we would suggest President Trump may want to name as the special envoy of the U.S. But the special envoy idea is a new idea. I think it's a really great idea. So the one thing I know we're going to be forced to lose Dave McCormick a little bit early. So with your permission, Pavel, I'm going to turn to John and Dave next for a little bit of a view from capital markets, from investment standpoint. I'll turn to John first and then Dave. And the question is really looking at this from a market standpoint. What is it going to take, in your view, how will capital markets assess the initiative that the ambassador and others have talked about? What will governments in the region have to do to make this more attractive? You look all over the world, so you've got to size up this region against other regions. How will you do that? So I'll turn to both of you to answer that, but I'll start with John, and I wonder if you can also talk a little bit about your presence in Poland, because I think most people in the room don't really understand how major the Goldman presence is in Poland and why you're there. And maybe if you could kick off with that, and then I'll turn to both of you to answer the other questions.
Yeah, thank you very much. Is this working? So thank you very much, and I'm very happy to be here. And let me say, together with my partner, David McCormick, together as co-chairing our efforts at the Atlantic Council. He chairs the International Advisors, I'm chairing the board, and together with Fred, we're very devoted to this initiative, and we're very focused on it, so very happy to be here. In terms of investment, the types of investments to be made, particularly in this region, I mean, obviously there are commercial loans, bank financing. There is the official flows, which is really associated with development assistance, mainly government, and then foreign direct investment and foreign portfolio investment. So if we take foreign direct investment, an enormously powerful force. When I was in the White House in the 80s, I think worldwide, it amounted to about $57 billion then foreign direct investment. This has grown to well over $1 trillion in the world today. 65,000 companies engaged, 850,000 different affiliates that are engaged. And what are they trying to do? They're trying to seek different things for each one. They're trying to seek markets for their goods and services. They're trying to either seek resources that they don't have, strategic assets that they may not have, or trying to achieve efficiency. So if we take a look from my perspective from Goldman Sachs, as we looked at this region, we invested in Poland in building an operation there, which we recognized what we were deficient in, which was resource. So in Poland, we found the opportunity to add an enormous amount of technologists, and we were able to draw on a workforce that was across Europe, not just Poland. So we have now 500 people growing to over 1,000 people that we will locate this hub in Warsaw, and we're very devoted to do that. As a byproduct of not only that activity, but also our main activities and more in the portfolio investment, we're looking for opportunities to expand our own business and engaging in companies to do just that. And PZU is one such company that we have the opportunity in asset management arena to do a lot of work for. And through these associations, these business associations, we're able to do more. So Pavel and I sponsored an activity in New York in which he brought 40 Polish businesses to New York to meet with the investment community, U.S. investment community, and to spend a couple of days doing that. Those kind of activities, which he can also speak to, are further just advancing this kind of initiative and exchange, particularly exposing opportunities that otherwise to portfolio managers wouldn't be known. So I think that that's extremely important initiative.
Okay, thank you. Let's see here. Let me take that. Yeah, thank you. Well, first of all, thank you, Pavel, for hosting, and Your Excellencies. It's great to be here to recognize and appreciate all the great success, but also really to look forward. I thought I might try to make 3 points about what's going on here in the context of through the eyes of a global investor. And there were three things that I thought might be relevant. The first is that if you look across the developed world, we're going through something called a paradigm shift, which is to say that we've had an extended period of monetary policy that's been very positive for all assets. So you've had the best performing period in the last 10 years for assets, and one of the best performing periods in the last 100 years. You've had relatively modest growth, an increase in debt, by and large, in the developed world, and there's been a number of other consequences of that, including a growth in populism and divisiveness in our political system. And if you look forward on the returns in the developed world, it's likely to be much, much less than it's been over the next 10 years than it's been over the last 10 years. Important to have that context when you look towards Central and Eastern Europe, because what stands out here is the enormous growth that this region has had in the last 25 years, which really stands out not just in the developed world, but across the world, and is, compared to all emerging markets, those growth numbers would be very favorable. And you've also seen innovation in fiscal policies and monetary policies, particularly in the countries that have independent monetary policies, which have been stimulative and continuing expansion, much along the lines of what's now being thought of in the developed world. And so the big question is, what's the next act in terms of continuing that growth trajectory, continuing that period of expansion, which brings us to the 3 Cs initiative and why that's so important. Because if you're a global investor, you're thinking about the underlying fundamentals, one of which is productivity, and the 3 Cs and the initiatives that are outlined have enormous consequences for productivity if they're executed well. It also creates the underlying cross-border integration that's so important to economic growth, benefits of your citizens, and makes it a very attractive destination for outside investors. And so as an investor, we really applaud your efforts, but also as a former policymaker, it's a great direction forward, and we wish you the best of luck.
One very quick follow-up question for Dave and John, and I know, Dave, then you have to go. As put on your former U.S. government hats, you Treasury and the various positions you've had, what's your advice to the U.S. government about this initiative? Not just whether it should be supported, but how? And then what's your advice to the governments in the region? Because you know the government side of this, but you're also going to, what from an investment standpoint, private sector investors are going to look at in terms of government commitment. And so why don't you go first, Dave, and then John?
Well, there's a macro point, which is a pro-business environment, pro-business policies, continuing the good work that's been done in many of your countries is sort of a first principle. It's a foundational set of things that are necessary for the U.S. government support, but also for investor support. But then the second thing is related to what the ambassador said, which is actually execution. And there's a period of visualization and conceptualization and conferences and talking that then quickly needs to turn to a period of execution, and far better to execute on a narrower agenda to build momentum to expand the support for your efforts than to have a broad vision that continues to be caught up in discussions without any execution. So I think we all benefit from actually making things happen, and I think the next step is really to do so.
Yeah, I think if I were still in the U.S. government, I think I would focus on first, if I look at all trade, intra-European trade, imports, exports that are happening, the percentages are so high of how much trade is just done between European countries together. So I would want to try to figure out how can I get a bigger piece of that action for the United States in terms of what barriers exist and what could be done. So I would do that. I'd look at the instrumentalities of the U.S. To helping to create incentives, not necessarily just the official flows of development assistance, but really looking at what can exist between these enterprises. We've just changed OPIC to now expand tremendously. And while that tends to be more developing world focused, I would like to have more focus on where it can improve the relations. Third, I'd be focused a lot more in Eastern and European members of the European Union, because I think that's a place where the United States can strengthen its relations with Europe. There seems to be more opportunities. And then last, I would really focus on incentivizing those things that President Latvia spoke about, which is the environments to increase investment have to have a number of factors associated with them. He mentioned tax, he mentioned rule of law. You have to have the legal system that can support the treatment, the national sort of treatment across. You have to protect shareholders' rights. You have to have those factors that are going to increase investment. And certainly if you have a tax regime and a prudential regulatory regime, that helps. I always worry that the poor Eastern European countries, as they've adjusted into it, they've come into a full European system. And I worry that some of the burdens that have been created from a regulatory point of view make it quite difficult to operate, haven't had the advantages of the time to adjust, their systems aren't as developed. And you see that in terms of just the whole allocation of the EU budget. I noticed that the government just announced its, the EU government announced its sustainable finance and investment agenda. And one of the things in particular I would look at is in the transition mechanism to be put in place, that you have to recognize that, you know, while there's the desire to be sort of this cohesion within Europe, nonetheless, a number of countries in the Eastern and Central Europe need major support to have that transition ever take place. And right now, I think the estimate I saw in the budget was $7.5 billion. With a goal of 100. I mean, I guess it's subject to the decisions to be made on the budget, but more resources are going to be needed for that transition on a climate basis.
Thank you, and I'm afraid we have to excuse Dave. Having Bridgewater and Goldman on a single panel here talking about this is a really big deal. It's a really rare occurrence. With both of them so deeply associated with the Atlantic Council, I think it will be a less rare occurrence going forward in the future. So let me turn to Pavel and then to Karen. First of all, thank you for hosting us here. You actually have some news for us. I must say, I'm sitting here, I must address this all the presidents and prime minister. So I covered the Pope's visit, the Polish Pope's visit to Poland. I also covered an organization named Comecon. I'm not sure if you remember this economic organization for the Central Warsaw Pact Economic Organization. Whoever would have thought I would be introducing the head of Central Europe's largest financial institution, and he was about to talk about creating a business council for Central Europe. So talk a little bit about why this Growing Europe initiative now, and why this council and what it will do.
Yes, thank you very much, and once again, thank you very much for accepting our invitation. Now, the Growing Europe initiative grew in a certain way out of the discussions that we had with global investors, and obviously, you know, we speak to, as a stock-listed company, we speak to the big US investors, we speak to the big Asian investors, and most of the time, obviously, they would allocate part of their investments to emerging markets. But when you look at the big chunk of that, most of it would go to Brazil, Russia, India, China, potentially South Africa. And when you ask the question why, obviously it's a question of growth, but it's also a question of scale. And all of them have recognized that you need to be invested in emerging markets in order to get some growth in your portfolio. What always astonished me is that Central Eastern Europe, or Growing Europe, like we like to call it now, is a little bit overlooked in this respect, and I always found underinvested, underpromoted, being given its attractiveness. And I think its attractiveness is bigger than ever. I mean, we live in times where you know, macroeconomic and trade risks are there, and I think that this region, our region, is particularly attractive when you combine two significant factors. First of all, it has, in my view, the stability and the transparency of a developed region, being part of the European Union, being part of NATO, having been democracies for the last 3 decades. But on the same time, it has the growth of an emerging market. And I believe that any single investor who is looking for stable yield, stable growth, should be looking at this region. Now, why aren't they? Because we are not perceived as a region. Because most of the time we are being seen as individual countries, countries that to global investors sometimes seem too small, also from the point of view of their capital markets, to be really given the effort of analyzing exactly the macroeconomic outlook, the political environment, and then say, okay, I will pick one or two companies out of there. And being inspired a little bit by the event that we've done together with John, Goldman Sachs, around Poland in New York, I just thought it would be great to give Central Eastern Europe a business voice. So there's a political voice already, thanks to the initiative and to the starting of the president of Croatia and president of Poland, and the heads of states who have engaged in building the 3 Cs as a political body. But I thought that being given that the CCs is all about investment, it's all about promoting business, it would be really paramount to have a business leader's voice who can in a certain way speak around why their region is such a success. Because it is a success. There are, to give a couple of numbers, out of our region there comes 30,000 startups, 12 of which are unicorns, so they have already passed the mark of 1 billion market cap, so altogether they're worth around now $30 billion. And the 3 Cs represent around 10% of the GDP of the European Union, but they have represented over 20% of the growth of the GDP of the European Union. So you see a disproportionate that is still growing in terms of where the actual growth of the European Union comes. And I've reached out to a couple of CEOs, peers and fellows in the different regions to say, why don't we do something together? Why don't we tell those stories? And I was extremely uplifted by the fact how anonymously everybody embraced this idea, just saying, nobody's to blame for the fact that people don't talk about our success if we don't talk about them themselves. We cannot expect anybody to tell our story for us. We have to tell it ourselves. And thanks to that, it was my great pleasure to learn that all of the CEOs to whom I reached out have said at once, why haven't done with this before? So we decided to make a business council of the biggest and the most thriving companies in Central Eastern Europe that will reunite us, that we will give us a chance to meet, because funnily enough, we know our peers in Western Europe, we know our peers in the United States. We don't know each other that well. And if you want to cooperate, the first thing is about personal relations, telling stories, and we all face very similar challenges. And so the idea was to know each other better, to create a platform where we can exchange ideas, and then create a platform out of which we can tell global partners and global investors around the success stories that came out of Central Eastern Europe and are yet to come. And I'm extremely grateful that there are so many companies that have signed up to it. And we have also 4 CEOs who came only to Davos to announce today the fact that they are starting this. And I wanted to point out something that is very important for me, and it has been said by Madam President of Croatia, is that we see this as only a positive and constructive voice. We want to say how the European Union is growing. So it's not about who is not in there, it's about who is in there. And when you go to the panels around Davos today, a lot of the voices are, okay, the big technological race is about China and the United States. Where is the European Union? And we speak a lot about the European Union being a little bit the status quo, fighting for the status quo. I think it is also an inspiration for the European Union. It's also an inspiration to the world to remind everybody the European Union has a part of it which is emerging, which is just starting, and that you should follow.
So are the 4 business leaders here? Or
they are here in the 4. So if you, and they will come to the scene after that, and we will make a little show around.
Fantastic. And can you, just because there are people gathering news there in the background, just very quickly, how many business leaders will this be? And what, in the best of all worlds, what do you expect them to do?
So for the time being, it's 12 of us. As you know, it has been work to convince everybody to sign up to an idea that hasn't existed before.
Yeah.
I think after today, it will be work to keep people out, not to get in there all together. So as always, it is the glory of the founders. So I'm extremely grateful for those who have signed up. And my dream is to have 2 or 3 business leaders out of each country. I'm obviously very much counting also on the heads of states of helping us to that. So the idea is to have 2 to 3 business leaders of each country that would meet regularly and that could form the basis of interaction, also hopefully in Tallinn, when we can be a useful partner for the heads of states, for the heads of government, to discuss the infrastructure investments and the investments in the region that are being contemplated now. Because in a certain way, as has been said before, all those investments, they're not happening in a vacuum. They have to be grounded in business logic, and it is not a good practice to speak about business without business. So and therefore I believe, and my dream is that we will be a very recognized body, and obviously the long-term goal is that growing Europe will become just as a recognizable theme or investment theme as BRICS are today. And that is the vision, if you want to.
So I'm going to turn to Karen for the last intervention. I know that we're near the witching hour. So, Pavel, just one question, but maybe see if you can do this in 2 or 3 sentences, because you're going to have to do this. It's what we call an elevator pitch. Yes. So I've got billions of dollars from this. I actually don't, sadly, but if I did, I can go to Latin America. I can go Southeast Asia. I can choose Africa. There are just so many regions, and some of these regions will produce actually larger growth potential, maybe more risk, but larger growth. What's the most compelling investment rationale for growing Europe?
You have a region of 100 million citizens that covers 1/3 of the European Union that has been growing for the last 3 decades, and that is including one of the countries that only the 3rd in the history have made the leap of from emerging market to developed markets. So you have a region that is pretty much poised to grow, that is stable also, that is part where your investments and your rights as an investor are guaranteed by bodies like the European Union and by every single club that there is. So you might run after, you might thrive after bigger growth, you might get bigger stability, but you will not find a better mix of both than in growing Europe. I hope you liked your elevator pitch.
I'm reaching. And applause also for the business leaders who are here.
Yes, here you go.
So I'm reaching for my wallet. I'm ready. So Karen, so Google has an enormously robust presence in Europe, but a growing presence in Central Europe. We've had the pleasure of working with the Google team in Poland. They're a fantastic team. Google recently announced plans to open a new cloud region in Warsaw, Poland, so that it can expand its services to a growing customer base in Central and Eastern Europe. That's not an insignificant decision. I wonder if you can talk a little bit about that decision and what makes this customer base so interesting to you and to Google.
Great. Well, thanks, Fred, and thanks to the Atlantic Council for its leadership on this, and to your excellencies, not just for being here, but for your commitment to digital growth and to including it as a core pillar of the 3 Cs initiative. It's certainly been noticed. We were very excited by the announcement that you mentioned, Fred, of our creation of a Google Cloud region for Poland and CE recently. And look, I think it's ultimately informed by 3 things. By, first of all, our excitement about growth in the region, and what Pavel just mentioned, I think, reflects that. It's not, of course, just the broader growth, but also specifically the growth of digital in the region. You see the digital economy in the CE region growing at twice the pace of Western Europe, and we can see that continuing to go, particularly
growing at twice the pace.
Twice the pace. So 6%, a little more than 6%. Compared to 3% in Western Europe. So I'd say, first of all, it's growth. I think, secondly, it's talent. You know, there's certainly the stories of the unicorns, there's the 30,000 startups, but there's also the fact that there are 240,000 STEM graduates every year graduating out of the CE region, which is twice the number, a lot of twices, twice the number you see coming out of Northern Europe, as an example. So this is a region that has a great talent pool to enable to continue to grow. And then I think finally, I would just say we're excited by the commitment that we've seen by the governments of the region, by the inclusion, for instance, of its presence in the 3Cs initiative. So, you know, those, for our perspective, is what we've looked at, and then have had some great partnerships with governments and private sector companies as we've made this significant decision to invest.
So, and then finally, looking at technology investment opportunities across growing Europe, where do you think they're the greatest? And in setting up the digital pillar, one of the three major pillars of 3Cs, what would you like to see most from that pillar? What would get Google incredibly excited about 3Cs?
So I think first of all, on the first question, I mean, I think the interesting, exciting thing is there really are a very broad array of opportunities, whether you're looking at B2B sort of technology initiatives, the consumer base is strong, so there's a variety of things there. In terms of what we would like to see, I think I'd say four things very quickly. The first is infrastructure. I know that's high on the list and the agenda. So I think that commitment is there. We just need to see it fulfilled. I think secondly, I would point to digital skilling. At the high end, you've got STEM graduates with a great deal of talent. The challenge, not just in CE, but more broadly, is the average person. And we need to raise the digital literacy of the average individual. And Google, in that regard, I'm very proud. We made a commitment last year to $20 million of investment. We've trained 1 million people already and looking to do more. But these are small and medium-sized enterprises. These are kids.
And trained 1 million to do?
To become more digitally literate. So basic coding, for instance, or simply, you know, in the case of people who simply aren't familiar with how do you use technology, some really elementary stuff. But we have teams out in the region, cities that we're working on to do this. So I'd say skill sets the second. Third would be actually driving a culture of investing in and supporting technology throughout the public sectors of these countries, but also the private sectors. Recognizing that the distinguishing characteristic in industry to come is going to be how advanced are you in this sense? Do you have AI plans for your companies? You know, what is your technology strategy? And then the last thing I would say is, look, you've got to get the regulatory and policy environment right. And to the credit of the countries represented here today, we very much see that in these countries. But these countries exist within the broader construct of Europe writ large. And so having the powerful advocacy of this group of leaders as Europe decides what is its strategy going to be around how do you regulate technology, I think is going to be critical.
Thank you for that, Karin. I see Ian Brzezinski writing down your 4 pillars, and I think you may see them reemerge in Estonia. What do you think? I think those are great pillars to work on and great pillars to drive. So I'm going to pass to close over to Mark Lustin, of the CEO of Bank PZU. As I do this, I just want to draw attention to this crowd and to people in the back of the room, overflow audience, and to the media here, to have the President of Poland, of Croatia, of Latvia, the Prime Minister of Estonia, all in the same room is just a really, really big deal. To have our Polish hosts here, PZU, Bank PZU, PZU is fantastic, and I must say to have on one panel Google, Bridgewater, Goldman, and Georgette Mossbacher. I mean, I mean, these are four of the most powerful forces that I can possibly imagine. So I don't know, Georgette, did you have anything you wanted to volunteer just at the end before Mark comes up?
Yeah, I would just say that the opportunity is tremendous, but you got to get it right, and you have to go back to basics. Look at all of the things that investors look at. They're going to be looking at how is your stock market doing. If you're a booming country and your stock market is not booming. Why? They're going to look at the companies that are already there, the success they've had, particularly the investments that are exiting. Are they exiting successfully? Or if they're not, what inhibited that? So I think governments have to get really down to those basics and take a look at the entire landscape in order to project a positive image for business. And business is very smart. They look at everything. They do not invest money until they see, they check out every box. So you want to make sure your reputation is fundamental to investors. So you have to take as much, invest in as much in that and your brand, because the question is, around the world, what's made in Estonia? What's made in Poland? What does that mean? What does that conjure up? This is real. We're all about branding. Look around the room. And what does it mean? And countries have to think that way too. Having said that.
Madam Ambassador, thank you. Let me pass to Marek, please.
Dear President, Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, we have gathered here to discuss economic vitality of the Central and Eastern Europe. Free Seas region is vital for the growth of the whole Europe. Its population accounts for 20% of EU, but 20% of the growth, 10% of its GDP. It is the place where the growth in Europe happens. The region has been growing twice as fast as the rest of the whole EU 28. And this is the place where the growth happens in a very sustainable way. Public finances are much healthier than in those countries of the Western EU countries, and the unemployment is much lower than more of the developed European countries. It's actually almost twice as low as in the rest of the EU. As the distinguished panelists elaborated in details about the CE potential, it has one of the greatest potentials for further economic development in the world. As the CEO of Bank PKO, banking arm of the largest financial group in the region, I'm very excited about what has just happened today and what we are just about to celebrate shortly after my speech. With enormous help of our friends who supported the Free Seas initiative, we brought to life today the new dimension of the Free Seas, the business dimension. We trust that what we have brought to life today, the Business Council of Growing Europe, will further foster the economic links in the region, will bring the new investments, and will speed up the growth of the region even further. Since we are the very practical people, we are business people, it is supposed to be a forum where things are not discussed, but where the things get done. Dear ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, many thanks for your help in letting it happen. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. So I would just very briefly ask the panelists to take their seats again, because as we said, we have a small announcement that is the cherry on the top. And I would now like to, I think we will want to ask now, Marek, I will ask you to stay with us. And if you think Polish last names are difficult, then you have not seen Hungarians yet. Therefore, I need my notes. And therefore, I would ask Peter Irykowski, CEO of Exponea. I would ask Lanz Lobenchik of OTP. And I would ask Varga Moed of UiPath. And ladies and gentlemen, I just wanted to say, I think we will project the logos now from the, so we need to build a little bit up. We will project the logos. So as we said, today is the day where we would like to formally start the Business Council of Growing Europe. I am, first of all, very happy that 12 companies whose logos you see behind me have signed up to this idea. And I'm even more thrilled that some of their CEOs and some of the leaders of this company. I saw my logo and I said that it's time to come. Come. Great. Well, welcome. That some of them have decided to come to Davos for this occasion. So you have seen the elevator pitch. I'm not going to make a fool out of myself to introduce the companies. Maybe if I could ask you in 2 sentences. As I said, we want to tell the success stories of Central Eastern Europe. Why don't you tell us yours in 2 sentences, starting with Peter, please.
So Exponia is a company that started 4.5 years back. It's now valued at over 300 million. And one of the things is, we currently, when we market ourselves in the US or UK, we don't market ourselves as a CE company, because it's currently not beneficial. And I see the Growing Europe thing as something that should change that. UiPath, which we'll be speaking later, is actually the fastest growing software company in history, and most people don't know it's from CE as well. So we want to change this, and that's why we are supporting this initiative. Thank you.
So László, OTP Bank from Hungary.
OTP Bank is a regional banking group, a Hungarian banking group which is present in 12 countries in the CE region. And we are one of the most profitable banks in Europe at the moment, close to 20% return on equity, growing double digit, mid-teens, and we are quite acquisitive. So we are one of the few players who actually invest within the region, from the region. Last 3 years, we acquired 8 banks in these countries, spending more than 2 billion euros. So I think our profile fits very well to this initiative. Thank you.
I just wanted to say we're very glad we're not competing in any of the markets. We mentioned UiPath. Varga's with us. Quickest growing company in the world, actually.
Well, I don't know if we're the quickest in the world, but we have been told by the VCs in the Silicon Valley we're the fastest software, enterprise software company in the history of enterprise software. So UiPath was born and is still very much deep in Romania. We have become the global leader in a new category of software enterprise called RPA, Robotic Process Automation. In 3 years' time, we came from behind and have become the global leader, surpassing our British and American competitors. So there is a lot of talent in this region, and we do believe that there is no reason why other companies could not follow UiPath's path. And our latest evaluation was $7 billion.
And we're also lucky that we have Bupros from Bulgaria. If you could speak a couple of words of yours.
Yeah, I was there and they said I will come and see how this goes. No, I'm like 7 billion, we're still far away from that, but we was able to start to acquire companies in US, Germany and so on over the last years. Now we're a company which is less than 10 years out of Bulgaria. We have 10 countries, 28 offices, and we are doing well. We are in our business, not in the enterprise software, but in the solutions, we are definitely the fastest growth in Southeastern Europe. Thank you.
And a company that in Poland doesn't need introduction, but still I would ask Marek Luszczyn to tell a little bit about PKO SA.
Okay, thanks, Paweł. PKO SA is within the PZU group since the last 2.5 years, when it was bought back by PZU and Polish Development Fund from UniCredit. It is a bank of 91 years of history, by now one of the oldest financial institutions in the country. And we are proud to be part of the largest financial institution group in the Central Europe, headed by Paweł.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So we have so many important people in the room. I do not want to longen it up any minute longer. So in front of us is a memorandum that we have prepared. It says that we want to cooperate, that we want to promote our region, that we will dedicate our time to make sure that growing Europe becomes known. As I said, most of the companies have already signed before. Some of these fantastic business leaders have decided to come physically to Davos to sign this with us. And if I may ask to start with B as in Bullpros, if you could sign this for us. In front of you, history is being made. Marek Rusztyn for PKO. So Peter from Exponel. Thank you very much. Laszlo for ATP, if I may ask you. Thank you, Bert. And UiPath, if I may ask you. Thank you very much, Peter.
And last but not least, Pavel for PZU.
I'm already doing this.
Yes, you are.